right, today we are talking about ExoKitty, Love in Taipei, oh my god, and Capitalist Realism, a book by Mark Fisher. So looking for an idea for this video was tough. My inspiration well has been dried. I haven't watched anything recently that really captured my imagination. As I'm conceptualizing this YouTube channel more, I'm figuring out that I want to do stuff called critical theory, which is a type of critique of culture, usually coming from the Marxist tradition. And I watch these very silly shows. ExoKitty and Love in Taipei are literally for, teenagers, maybe middle schoolers. These are rom-coms, but the interesting part of them is that they're Asians. ExoKitty is based off an Asian American girl who's half Korean, half white, and she goes to South Korea at this school called KISS, Korean International School of something. And then also a very similar story by, I think, the same producers of ExoKitty called Love in Taipei. Almost the exact same concept. It's this girl who goes to a cultural program in Taiwan to reconnect with her culture because she's Taiwanese American. I watched these two very silly shows, very camp shows with my girlfriend and some of her friends. And we laughed and laughed and laughed at how silly they were and sort of badly written they were. But it got me thinking about Asians and Asian racism and how racism kind of blends with capitalist realism and the critical theory that I've been, reading all about. Because I'm trying to figure out a way how to criticize these pieces of art that I consume, man. And I'm trying to figure out a good, comprehensive way to do it. But I've been inspired. But capitalist realism, I just picked this book up. I forget who recommended it. It was probably a YouTube video, but it seemed like a really interesting book, and it's really short, which is nice. It's by this dude, Mark Fisher, who sadly killed himself. A lot of mental health issues, but he thought those were connected to capitalism. This is his best work, capitalist realism. It was a big during the 08, Wall Street crash, the default thing on the loans for the houses and the mortgages and the bad mortgages and stuff. And there was a movement called Occupy Wall Street, and Mark Fisher was a big thing that people were reading, students were reading at the time. And it is a it's a really beautiful way of tearing down the capitalist way of looking at things. But I made the connection between that and ExoKitty and Love in Taipei because they feel like, I don't have a better word, but liberal way of solving racism. I guess what I mean by liberal is that it's a type of gestural anti-capitalism, which is a term that Mark Fisher uses in his book, where a piece of work does all the anti-capitalism for you. You have this crazy irony where that capitalism is wrong and that it does this bad stuff, but you still actively participate in it and have your any revolutionary ideals stripped away from you. He basically posits that now one can imagine the end of the world before they can imagine the end of capitalism. It is so deeply ingrained in us and so deeply ingrained in our minds that it seems inescapable. And it's inescapable in our media, and we live with this doublethink. Doublethink is a term from 1984. We know that it's wrong, but we still continue to live on inside of it. And gestural anti-capitalism is a very common trope that pieces of media use that enforce this. So he talks about Disney Pixar's WALL-E as a great example of gestural anti-capitalism. Take Disney Pixar's WALL-E, 2008. This film shows an Earth so despoiled that human beings are no longer capable of inhabiting it. We're left in no doubt that consumer capitalism and corporations, or rather one megacorporation, by and large, is responsible for this depredation. What we have here is a vision of control and communication, much as Jean Baudrillard understood it, in which subjugation no longer takes the form of a subordination to an extrinsic spectacle, but rather invites us to interact and participate. A film like WALL-E exemplifies what Robert Fowler has called interpassivity. The film performs our anti-capitalism for us, allowing us to continue to consume with impunity. The role of capitalist ideology is not to take an explicit case for something in the way that propaganda does, but to conceal the fact that the operations of capital do not depend on any sort of subjectively assumed belief. What's so bad about it about capitalism is that you take even something that's expressly anti-capitalist, like WALL-E, literally criticizing a large corporation, by and large, it does your anti-capitalism for you. Hello, this is Luke in the editing room in the future after this video is made. I think it's important to clarify what exactly Fisher means by this quote. The rest of what I say is true, but I think a really important part is when he says, the role of capitalist ideology is not to make an explicit case for something in the way that propaganda does, but to conceal the fact that the operations of capital do not depend on any sort of subjectively assumed belief. I kind of had trouble with this when I first read it, but I consulted my computer overlord, who was able to explain it to me well. Conceal the fact that the operations of capital do not depend on any sort of subjectively assumed belief. So the important part in the distinction between capitalism and capitalist realism and socialist realism, as conceived of by Stalin, is that capitalism kind of runs automatically. So even if you actively don't believe in it, it will still run anyways. Socialism depends on it's social. So you have to believe in the process, you have to have class consciousness, and you have to believe in the process for the system to work in the best way that it can. Capitalism does not need that. So the concealing of the fact that it doesn't depend on any sort of subjectively assumed belief is the most important part of these pieces of media. That's what makes them a better propaganda tool for capitalism, as opposed to direct propaganda, like I talk about later. All right, that's it. And even at the end of the movie, and Fisher talks about later, they kind of just return to Earth, and they don't have a different way of conceiving things. They just come back to a planet and treat it better. But there's no any sort of anti-corporation sentiment or anti-capitalist sentiment by the end. It's just they kind of just come back to Earth and the problem's solved. But yeah, it's less like a direct propaganda, Fisher talks about a Stalinist state having direct propaganda, but a willing secession to capitalism. We can't even conceive of anything else. We are within this system so deeply, and the realism is so real to us, that even when a piece of media criticizes it, we are still subject to it and we aren't fucking creative enough to come up with something else. And this really resonated with me when I was watching these ridiculous movies. I was like, I feel this way, but about anti-racism in these movies. Stuff like the model minority myth, expectations of success being put onto Asian kids by their parents, very common tropes, almost overused tropes at this point, which is what I would argue. And it contributes to a similar kind of realism, capitalist realism. And I think that capitalism is connected to racism, which is something that a lot of the critical theorists did not talk about for a long time, which is honestly super cringe. That race and black radicalism, as it's conceived of by who we're going to use, Cedric Robinson, was not a part of any of this. Cedric Robinson, author of Black Marxism, and he's like this philosopher dude, but he wrote a really cool thing called Black Marxism that connects the history of capitalism with the history of racism and labor, and those labor movements. He sort of maps them out, and he connects Marxism and anti-racism. Now, Marx isn't racist, obviously. Maybe he's a little bit, I don't know, he's old and white. But he didn't really have much about race in his conception of class struggle. Cedric Robinson obviously thinks that these cannot be separated because questions of lower class black people who were, post-slavery were put back into the working force and stuff like that. It really coincides well with the rise of capitalism. And he almost argues that it's an extension of feudalism, which might be true. I'm not going to talk about that because that's hard and complicated. But basic idea, Cedric Robinson, Black Marxism connects capitalism and racism, forming it into something that he calls racial capitalism, which was for me was ooh, that's what's going on with these movies. And now I can do a little bit of racial capitalist realism. That is the amalgamation of my theory, Luke theory, Phillips cultural theory, Phillipsian cultural theory. I also have a spectrum of how anti-capitalist or anti-racial capitalist your movie is. There's a lot of movies about race nowadays, a lot of movies about capitalism and going against capitalism nowadays, and I have fashioned myself a spectrum, another Phillipsian idea. I'm a big deal philosopher, guys. That's what I'm saying. But before we get into all that theory stuff, I want to get into how racism works for Asian people, because not all of you guys are Asian or Asian American. Being Asian American is kind of unique in the way that you experience racism. I mentioned a little bit before, but the model minority myth, I think that is the one that affects people the most, the one that's sort of talked about in media the most, but something that I think is kind of misunderstood, because the model minority is a myth. It's a very common stereotype to be put onto Asians that they reach a sort of higher educational, vocational standards than a lot of other races. And it's because of our culture. It's because of our work ethic. We worked so much harder, and we're so much smarter, and we're such focused first-generation immigrants that we were able to break through and be successful, more successful than other races, black and brown races specifically. Can we see where this is starting to be problematic, right? It promotes a kind of racial hierarchy, which is an ideal of white supremacy, right? So racial hierarchy is bad. You know, got Asians over black people, and of course, white people are at the top. Me, I'm half white, half Asian, so I have a kind of unique experience, I guess. You know, not feeling a part of one community or the other. It's just kind of another trope, another stereotype. A trope which is expounded on in Exo Kitty specifically, not feeling like you're a part of your culture. So the model minority myth, the reason it's a myth is because the idea that Asians work harder or were like more culturally more whatever hardworking. I mean, I guess it's kind of true a little bit, but what matters a lot more is how immigration worked in the United States, and that the model minority myth benefits the white capitalist class, as I'll call them. Okay, I'm gonna talk about Chinese people, at least just to start off. So Chinese people generally are more successful than other races in this country. You know, have higher graduation rates, higher, college grad rates, higher high school graduation, blah, 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 make more money, blah, 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 whatever. But I tell people about the Chinese Exclusion Act, and people don't know that this happened. Chinese people were banned from the country in
1882.
I'm pretty sure, mid-1800s. Chinese people were dumped into the labor force, the unskilled labor force, quote unquote, as laborers. Obviously they built transcontinental railroads, but from American laborers, there started to be a lot of really strong anti-Chinese sentiment. And that's what got this Chinese Exclusion Act passed through Congress. So Chinese people were kicked out of the country, but the clause of that was, it was for laborers. Laborers were banned from immigrating from China. So the people who could come to the United States were usually of the business class or of a higher class. Than blue-collar workers from China, who were, a huge part of American development, along with Irish people, Italians. But those Chinese were stealing our jobs, so they had them kicked out. And this changed in 1965. 1965! They changed this rule. That's kind of a long time ago, but not that long ago. Chinese people were really banned from this country. But the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act, they couldn't ban certain countries from immigrating to the U.S. Obviously, this rule was broken. Very recently, it was broken under Trump's last administration. The Supreme Court ruled it fine that for him to ban people from majority Muslim countries. But besides the point, Chinese were allowed into the country again. But there was a priority list. Priority was always given to skilled workers, quote-unquote skilled workers, who have specializations. And this, another layer, boom, of business class, upper class Asians, educated Chinese people coming into the country. And this obviously caused a rift, a divide. This built this model minority myth. Asians already had a head start. They already had generational wealth. They didn't have as much structural things crushing them, like the black community had, brown communities had, like redlining, being denied for house loans, things like that. Not in my backyard. That's been going on for a long fucking time. There's been a, concerted economic effort to stop black people from coming to the white neighborhoods. People will tend to stay in the same areas over time. Like, it's not like, they got rid of this redlining, or redlining's not as prevalent, quote unquote. It's still there for sure, but people will tend to stay where they've built some generational wealth or where their families have lived. So that's something that's literally structurally makes it harder for someone to ascend. classes in our capitalist system. So this is like a base for racial capitalism. Japanese people had a very kind of a similar story. Japanese were banned from the country, I'm pretty sure, especially during World War II. But it was a similar sort of deal. They prioritized skilled workers and specialized workers. I mean, the U.S. gave reparations for Japanese internment, which some people may not even know about. Yeah, Japanese people were interned during World War II, Japanese Americans. But yeah, they received apology, received reparations. Such a different treatment by the white political class of Asians, of East Asians specifically, than black people who've been here the whole time. And the prioritization of skilled labor that's still applied for other overseas people. So you see it in Indian communities as well, or Desi communities. A similar mindset of the model minority. It's deep, man. When someone says that someone is, fiscally conservative, socially liberal, like that doesn't mean anything. That means that you are conservative, basically, because everything is interlinked with economics. And there's another thing with Asian kids. Obviously, there is a lot of pressure, to be fair, from parents on their Asian kids. Asian kids have a really high teenage suicide rate, which is terrible, from academic pressures, right? So first generation people, I expect you to be successful. I worked really hard to build my convenience store I work at, the laundromat we work at, and now you have a chance to go to college and, make something of your life. It's a lot of pressure for immigrant kids. It's a common experience. The big thing is, if Asians can work hard, why can't you, black and brown people? And that's the kind of racial tension. White supremacy loves it, loves fighting between races. No way can they have solidarity and bring down our racial capitalist structures. But we are moving on. We're getting to the meat and freaking potatoes, man. Exo Kitty, baby. I feel like I need to give that background because success as an Asian person is a big theme throughout both of these movies, or movie and TV show, Love in Taipei and Exo Kitty. A common theme with Asian Americans is a disconnection with their original culture. You become disconnected with your culture as you live in America for longer and longer. You become integrated. Both of these girls, Ever Wong is shipped off to Taipei in some summer program to reconnect with her Taiwanese culture. And a sort of similar thing for Kitty Song-Covey. Oh, man.
Catherine Song-Covey, Kitty to my friends. And I'm on my way to Seoul, Korea.
Yes, I see that in the system.
Kitty Song-Covey, who is the main character of Exo Kitty, of course. These movies are painful. Like, you should know these...
What's wrong? What happened after that?
This TV series, Exo Kitty, is painful to watch. Oh, it's so cringe. So many scenes are so bad.
Poopy baby.
And then Love in Taipei is even worse. Like, the acting in that show, or that movie is like, oh my god.
What about Curfew?
Hey Ever, remember that crazy fun night when you followed the rules?
No.
Exactly, because no one ever remembers those nights.
Okay, sorry. I'm an actor. I shouldn't shit on actors so much. Love in Taipei has Nico Hiraga. He's a Bay Area guy. So, I won't shit on them too much. Hot take, the acting doesn't matter that much in these movies. It's about the romance and stuff, and the fun stuff. There's a lot of stuff about success and parental expectation. And this is a theme really common. Crazy Rich Asians, one of the first all-Asian casts in a long time since Joy Luck Club. Connecting with your culture and expecting success from your kids. Super common. But I want to talk about how, appealing to these sort of stereotypes, of course it gives an anti-racist sentiment, right? Like it's a step above, yellow face or a complete token Asian character doesn't speak English, ridiculous caricatures of Asian people. Yes, it is a step above straight up fucking racism. I'll give them that. But how I think it, how I connect it to this, it's gestural anti-racial capitalism. God, that is so hard to say. It gives us a solution within the system, right? Does our anti-racist work? Does our anti-racial capitalist work for us? Like how in WALL-E, they, it's like magically they figure it out and it's fine, and they return to their capitalist system and it's all good, and the system that put them there in the first place is back. It's all good. We take care of the planet a little bit better. Capitalism is still king, right? Our system is still perfect and still works. XO Kitty definitely does that. Oh my god. And I want to focus on, Dae. Okay, Dae is a young Korean fella who goes to kiss. Dae was talking with Kitty Song-Covey. They were in a long-distance relationship, and the whole reason she comes to kiss in the first place, is to chase a boy. But Dae is the one working class, kind of quote-unquote working class character. His dad works for Yuri's parents as a driver, so he drives Yuri around. That's how they get to know each other. Yuri is the rich girl who goes to kiss, who becomes good friends with Kitty, and they have a relationship later. Spoilers for both of these, by the way. Dae is in a relationship with Kitty for a little bit, and then he gets dumped. He gets ditched at the end of season 1. Kitty ends up liking Yuri a lot.
I thought I knew everything there was to know about love. But then I met you. Yuri!
She discovers that she's bisexual, and likes Yuri. Dae gets cucked. I just want to bring up one thing about Dae. So there's a plot point or some conflict over him being the one working class character, and that he needs to keep his scholarship to stay at the school, which is reasonable. Dae's scholarship, he needs to be the number 1 kid at KISS. He needs to be the number 1 academically at KISS. The one working class character has to be like so much better than all the rich people just to stay at the school. The only way he can stay at the school if he remains the number 1 student. That is ridiculous. It's a solution within the system, right? But his dad is really nice, and he doesn't have. He's nice to his son. He's the one nice Asian parent, because he is like working class guy. But Dae, feels the responsibility himself to work really hard and be the number 1 in his class so he can get a scholarship. It's all well and good, and it's nice that he feels that way. It makes him a very likable character or whatever. But like, he shouldn't have to do that. That's so ridiculous. It's like justifying the ridiculous academic standards put on Asian children by their parents. Another thing I want to talk about in XO Kitty is that there's a lot of themes about PR in the show. So I mentioned that the working class parent, Dae's dad, is a nice, hardworking guy. On the other hand, all the rich parents are, not as nice. Minho's dad is a big media guy, celebrity man. He is a big business owner. And then Yuri's parents are rich too, and her dad owns a huge firm, and he's very concerned with his PR, which is another theme in the first season. Yuri's dad gets outed for mistreating his workers, so he covers up for himself by making this school program for kids, for hardworking lower class kids to work their way up, and he does it just as a PR stunt. To cover up for his mistreatment of his workers. And he forces this relationship between Dae and Yuri, this fake relationship, which is like the central thing of season 1, is that Yuri and Dae are in a fake relationship. Yuri's really a lesbian the whole time, and Dae has to stay with her because he signed an NDA or his dad's paying for his schooling. Ridiculous rom-com, K-drama type stuff. By the end of season 1, Yuri's like, I'm a lesbian, bah! And Yuri's mom is like, I had another child, and it's Yuri's Australian teacher. Kitty figures that out, I guess. Bah! And then destroys the family, they get divorced. It's a critique, right? It's a critique of PR, which is something that is brought up in capitalist realism. Fisher talks about being an educator in colleges and sort of the rigors of getting assessed. It's more about how you looking like you're working or looking like you're doing good, as opposed to what you actually do in the end goals of the company. Yet the drive to assess the performance of workers and to measure forms of labor, which by their nature are resistant to quantification, has inevitably required additional layers of management and bureaucracy. What we have is not a direct comparison of workers' performance or output, but a comparison between the audited representation of that performance and output. Inevitably, a short-circuiting occurs, and work becomes geared towards the generation and massaging of representations rather than to the official goals of the work itself. So this critique aligns with the critique that ExoKitty has of PR, at least in the first season. We'll get into the second season. But the first season is like, yeah, he doesn't care about his family, and he only cares about PR for his company, and he can't bring his family together. Okay, what is our solution? It's an expressly anti-capitalist opinion. Expressly anti-capitalist. The solution? There is no solution. Yuri's mom divorces him. Yuri's mom is kicked off in season 2. We don't see her again. She's like, I just accept you for being lesbian, and I guess that's cool. And it goes against what most Korean parents would do. Ain't that right? Ha 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 ha. And Yuri's like, oh, I'm depressed now. Thanks, Mom. They don't even really make up, and they split all ties from each other. That's a solution for the PR problem, for the dad's obsession with PR. A completely destroyed family. And so this theme continues into season 2. So Minho's dad is similarly like a famous guy. I think he's kind of like Simon from American Idol, I guess. He's like the mean judge. So this is played a lot differently. So Minho's dad is, he's kind of a shabby guy. He doesn't seem like the best dad ever, but he's trying. At least by the end of the season, he's trying. And Minho has a decent dad who's rich and really famous, but at least he's nice to Minho. But the antagonist is Minho's crazy Christian girlfriend, and she gets to this fake relationship with him and gets a bunch of dirt on Minho's dad because Minho's dad roasted her when she was young and embarrassed her on a Korean equivalent of American Idol. She tries to take down his public image by, quote unquote, canceling him and ruining his PR, right? His PR, his representation. They go on a quest to save Minho's dad's PR. That is the goal of the final episode, is to save his dad from being canceled. And the dirt that Minho's girlfriend has is that Minho's brother, Junho, he has a baby mama, and he's gonna have a kid with one of his backup dancers. And Minho's dad wanted to cover it up, but they were like, you know what, Minho's dad? You know what we should do? We should tell the world that they love each other. And then they get engaged on stage, and the girlfriend, who's really a victim in the situation, we should say. She was embarrassed and made into a meme. But, she tried to win the competition, Minho's dad's competition. And Day's in the competition too. Day likes singing, apparently. And she's thwarted at the end, and Minho's dad's PR is saved. Because his son loves his baby mama, I guess. I mean, how much more liberal can you get than that? There's a very liberal solution to that problem. Literally within the system, it's like, oh no, my dad's PR is in trouble. He's gonna get epic canceled.
It's just my opinion. Go ahead and cancel me.
The girl is the victim in this situation. Like, I understand why she's trying to do this. I mean, she's like, I just want to do it to get famous, so we don't feel bad for her. But it's still effed up, man. It's still effed up. And they're justifying his, love of PR and, just wanting to look good, which is a part of capitalist realism. And the show is so silly. They do that a lot. Like, the main characters do a lot of bad stuff, like cheating. Kitty cheats. Kitty homewrecks 2 relationships, but we're supposed to love her. And she'd be like, oh my god, Kitty's so funny and she's so cool. Yuri cheats on her girlfriend with Kitty, But unfortunately, these people are the main characters, so we have to like them. Similar thing with Minho's dad. It's like, this guy just is trying to protect his PR again and doesn't let this girl participate and doesn't even have a constructive conversation with this girl after embarrassing her all those years ago. But she's made out to be the villain. It's just very silly. All right, on to Love in Taipei. I'm not gonna go as long as this one, but it takes place in Taiwan, the Republic of China. Not the People's Republic of China.
我们今生注定是沧桑，估计来要笑着走过呀，朋友啊，让我们一起牢牢铭记呀，我们今生兄弟情一场。
Sorry, I don't know what came over me just now. China number 1. Okay, anyways. The end of Love in Taipei is interesting, and I think is actually a little bit more anti-racist anti-racial capitalist than ExoKitty. So it's basically the same concept. She goes to Taipei. Ever Wong goes to Taipei to reconnect with her culture. And her main conflict in the movie is that well, obviously it's romance, it's a love triangle. But nobody cares about the love triangle. I don't care about the love triangle for the sake of this video. Ever Wong went to a med school to study to become a doctor, but she doesn't want to do it anymore. She has a passion for dance. How much more stereotypical Asian plot point can you get? I mean, that is directly the plot point from Glee. Mike Chang has the same problem.
School musical? I overheard your mother talk about it on the phone. You lied to me, and you made a liar out of your mother. You will quit immediately.
No, I love being a dancer.
Okay, I should stop talking about Glee. No more talking about Glee. Jesus Christ. But yeah, Ever Wong has the same problem. She wants to be a dancer, but she studied to be a doctor. And hey, I'll give him this. They extend a little bit on the idea. She auditions for a college, for a dancing college, a dance program. She doesn't actually get into it. And we all feel bad for her, because we definitely care about that character a lot. Yeah, we definitely care about her. By the end of the movie, that it's weird. It's sort of an unsatisfactory ending, but at the end of the day, it's more anti-racial capitalist than ExoKitty, which is funny to say because I think ExoKitty is better than Love in Taipei, which is really saying something. ExoKitty is cringe as fuck, but I mean, Love in Taipei.
It's raining.
Yeah, it is.
Man, that movie is hard to watch. I'm sorry. But it is still more anti-racial capitalist because Ever Wong ends by, telling her love, Nico Haraga, that she's chilling, that she's like, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing with my life, and that's fine. And to be fair, that is the most anti-racist sentiment that she could have, right? Like the success for Asians, that success binary of you're either really successful or you're nothing or you're the outside immigrant. They're going against that stereotype. So, you gotta give them that. They're doing that at the very least. Now, is there a solution outside of capitalism? No, but it's a better critique, I think, than ExoKitty, which finds its own solutions within the system, within capitalism. So, this is where my handy-dandy spectrum comes in. The Phillipsian spectrum of gestural anti-racial capitalism. So, the bottom tier of this tier list, I call it a tier list, of course, because I'm a professional philosopher and I use gaming terms to describe these ideas. But the bottom of this tier list is just straight up propaganda, like bold-faced propaganda, something like American Sniper, America number one, we fight hard to take control of the Middle East, whatever.
Stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
But I will say the one tier above that, right? It's arguable. Some people think liberals are worse than fascists because they're, wolf in sheep's clothing, right?
Who are trying to solve the problem. But you never see them going under the label of liberals. That white person that you see calling himself a liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere. He's the most deceitful. He's like a fox. And a fox is always more dangerous in the forest than the wolf. You can see the wolf coming. You know what he's up to. But the fox will fool you. He comes at you with his mouth shaped in such a way that even though you see his teeth, you think he's smiling and you take him for a friend.
But that one step above that is they criticize the system, but the solution is still systemic or keeps us within the system and has no challenge to it whatsoever. I think that tier is where ExoKitty firmly goes, making all these sort of anti-racist, anti-capitalist sentiments, but all the solutions are still within. Like Day still is a really successful student and he's able to keep his scholarship. That does not escape the success binary given to Asian people. But I will say the terrible movie Love in Taipei does get a little bit above it in the shallow critique. It critiques capitalism, but it has literally no solution and it just doesn't go very deep at all. I'd say The Big Short is a pretty good example as well, because that very directly points stuff out and provides no solution. And it's just greed is bad, and this is just a historical account of what happened during the 2008 financial crisis. I think Love in Taipei joins The Big Short in this tier because it points out this problem And The Big Short is very directly about capitalism, but I'm saying Love in Taipei is more about anti-racism, which is tied up in capitalism and the idea of racial capitalism. It points out a problem, and she doesn't really have a very satisfying solution for it. She's just like, I'm fine with having no direction in my life. Isn't that crazy for an Asian? I guess. If in a movie fantasy world, it is crazy. But in real life, it is the truth for many people. And then I have another tier above that. It's deep, so it goes a little deeper. And sometimes the solution will be outside of the system. Like, I put Everything Everywhere in this tier. I put, like, Sorry to Bother You in this tier. Even Do the Right Thing is in this tier. But yeah, it's a little bit more of a stronger critique. Like, Everything Everywhere, really talks about the difficulty of being an immigrant economically in America. And of course, their solution is a little bit like existential philosophy, kind of. I had my old video on that. Even a show like Beef goes a little deeper, talks about how we're not there for each other as much, and we're really angry, and it's hard to be a Korean person in a money-obsessed Los Angeles. It's hard to survive. And then the final tier is quite literally based. As based as you can get. Every part of the production is put there to inspire revolution or to inspire to break down our existing systems, right? I think very few things lie in this tier because Hollywood has a vested money interest in suppressing these kinds of movies. This is like the last kind of movie I think you want to make if you're a Hollywood studio, one that inspires a socialist revolution. The only thing that I could personally think of that is in this list is not even a movie, it is a play called Waiting for Lefty by a guy named Clifford Odets, who is a socialist, an American socialist in the 1930s. It's an anthology about striking workers. There was a performance where they were literally yelling strike on the stage, and then the audience joined the actors in shouting strike. That is the most based. That is the most fucking... almost nothing does that. But yeah, that's the most based. That is the highest end of my tier lists. Please comment things. If you know what's in that base tier list, please add more. I'd love to know if you can find anything else for me. It can be anything. Art, theater, movie, I don't care. Racial Capitalist Realism. A Phillipsian way of looking at stuff. Take me really seriously. No, please don't. I like memes and stuff. I like joking around. Besides anything, these are my observations about these shows. Use my handy dandy tier list, the Phillipsian the Phillipsian gestural anti-racial capitalist tier list. Use that to determine what kind of media you're watching, and how truly outside of the scope of capitalist realism it really is. Comments where you think certain pieces of media belong in my tier list. Give me some examples. Tell me how I'm wrong in the comments about all this stuff. If you're a Republican, if you're a liberal, be like, why are you making fun of me? Whatever. Please, just get the conversation started. I love your comments. Like, subscribe, interact! And please, oh my God, for the love of God, don't listen to Jordan Peterson, please. It will reset everything I just told you, so.
There are differences in ethnicity that don't look trivial. The Ashkenazi Jews, for example, have on average a 15-point advantage over the rest of the Caucasian population, which is sufficient to account for their radical overrepresentation in positions of authority and influence.
All right, I'll end on a nice little quote from Mark Fisher. Of course, capitalist realism is bleak, but, he has a little bit of hope. The tiniest event can tear a hole in the gray curtain of reaction, which has marked the horizons of possibility under capitalist realism. From a situation in which nothing can happen, suddenly anything is possible again. Thank you. Bye!